What is evolution?
Although it was originally defined in the 19th century as descent with modification, evolution is currently described as the change in frequency of genetic traits. Also known as the allelic frequency, within populations over time.
Do you really hear the ocean when you hold a seashell to your ear?
Although the sounds heard in a seashell are reminiscent of hearing the ocean, in reality they are ambient. Soft sounds that have been resonated and thereby amplified by the seashell's cavity. The extreme sensitivity of the human ear to sound is illustrated by the seashell resonance effect.
Why do cells die?
Cells die for a variety of reasons, many of which are not deliberate. For example, cells can starve to death, asphyxiate, or die from trauma. Cells that sustain some sort of damage, such as DNA alteration or viral infection, frequently undergo programmed cell death. This process eliminates cells with a potentially lethal mutation or limits the spread of the virus. Programmed cell death can also be a normal part of embryonic development. Frogs undergo cell death that results in the elimination of tissues, allowing a tadpole to morph into an adult frog.
Why do dogs hear more than humans?
A dog's ears are highly mobile, allowing it to scan its environment for sounds. The ears capture the sounds and funnel them down to the eardrum. Dogs can hear sounds from 4 times farther away than humans.
Which plant has the deepest root system?
Roots of the desert shrub mesquite, Prosope juliflora, have been found growing nearly 175 feet, 53.5 meter, deep near Tucson, Arizona.
What determines skin color?
Three factors contribute to skin color: 1. The amount and kind, yellow, reddish-brown, or black, of melanin in the epidermis; 2. The amount of keratin, yellow, in the epidermis and subcutaneous tissue; and 3. The amount of oxygen bound to hemoglobin, red blood cell pigment, in the dermal blood cells. Skin color is genetically determined, for the most part. Differences in skin color result not from the number of melanocytes an individual has, but rather from the amount of melanin produced by the melanocytes and the size and distribution of the pigment granules. although darker-skinned people have slightly more melanocytes than those who are light-skinned. The distribution of melanin in the higher levels of the epidermis contributes to their skin color.
When and what was the first animal sent into orbit?
A small female dog named Laika, aboard the Soviet Sputnik 2, launched November 3, 1957. Was the first animal sent into orbit. This event followed the successful Soviet launch on October 4, 1957, of Sputnik 1. The first man-made satellite ever placed in orbit. Laika was placed in a pressurized compartment within a capsule that weighed 1,103 pounds, 500 kilograms. After a few days in orbit, she died, and Sputnik 2 re-entered Earth's atmosphere on April 14. 1958. Some sources list the dog as a Russian Samoyed Laika named Kutyevka or Lemenchik.
How many volts are in lightning?
A stroke of lightning discharges from 10 to 100 million volts of electricity. An average lightning stroke has 30,000 amperes.
Do seedless watermelons occur naturally?
Seedless watermelon was first introduced in 1988 after 50 years of research. A seedless watermelon plant requires pollen from a seeded watermelon plant. Farmers frequently plant seeded and seedless plants close together and depend on bees to pollinate the seedless plants. The white seeds, also known as pods, found in seedless watermelons serve to hold a fertilized egg and embryo. Because a seedless melon is sterile and fertilization cannot take place, pods do not harden and become a black seed, as occurs in seeded watermelons.
Is it possible to compare the energy efficiency of different brands of appliances?
In 1980, the Federal Trade Commission's appliance labeling rule became effective. It requires energy guide labels be placed on all new refrigerators, freezers, water heaters, dishwashers, clothes washers, room air conditioners, heat pumps, furnaces, and boilers. The bright yellow labels with black lettering identify energy consumption and operating cost for each of the various household appliances. Energy guide labels show the estimated yearly electricity consumption to operate the product along with a scale of comparison among similar products. The comparison scale shows the least and most energy used by comparable models.
Who proposed the modern theory of the atom?
The modern theory of atomic structure was first proposed by the Japanese physicist Hantaro Nagayaka. 1865 to 1950, in 1904. In his model, electrons rotated in rings around a small central nucleus. In 1911, Ernest Rutherford discovered further evidence to prove that the nucleus of the atom is extremely small and dense and is surrounded by a much larger and less dense cloud of electrons. In 1913, the Danish physicist Niels Bohr, 1885 to 1962, proposed a model that is known as the Bohr atom. It suggested that electrons orbit the nucleus in concentric quantum shells at certain well-specified distances from the nucleus corresponding to the electron's energy levels. These orbits are known as Bohr orbits. Several years later, Erwin Schrödinger, 1887 to 1961, proposed the Schrödinger wave equation, which provided a firm theoretical basis for the Bohr orbits.
What is a Foucault pendulum?
An instrument devised by Jean Foucault, 1819 to 1868, in 1851 to prove that Earth rotates on an axis. The pendulum consisted of a heavy ball suspended by a very long fine wire. Sand beneath the pendulum recorded the plane of rotation of the pendulum over time. A reconstruction of Foucault's experiment is located in Portland, Oregon, at its convention center. It swings from a cable 90 feet, 27.4 meters, long, making it the longest pendulum in the world.
Who was Typhoid Mary?
Mary Mallon, 1855 to 1938, a cook who lived in New York City at the turn of the century, was identified as a chronic carrier of the typhoid bacilli, immune to the disease herself. She was the cause of at least 3 deaths and 51 cases of typhoid fever. She was confined to an isolation center on North Brother Island, near the Bronx. From 1907 to 1910 and from 1914 to 1938. The New York City Health Department released her after the first confinement on the condition that she never accept employment that involved handling food. But when a later epidemic occurred at 2 places where she had worked as a cook, the authorities returned her to North Brother Island, where she remained until her death from a stroke in 1938.
Which mushrooms were considered sacred by the Aztecs?
Mushrooms of the genera Conocybe and Psilocybe, both of which have hallucinogenic properties, were considered sacred by the Aztecs. These mushrooms are still used in religious ceremonies by the descendants of the Aztecs. Psilocybin, which is chemically related to lysenic acid diethylamide. LSD, is a component to both genera and is responsible for the trance-like state and colorful visions experienced by those who eat these mushrooms.
Prior to the condom, what was the main contraceptive practice?
Contraceptive devices have been used throughout recorded history. The most traditional of such devices was a sponge soaked in vinegar. The condom was named for its English inventor, the personal physician to Charles II, 1630 to 1685, who used a sheath of stretched, oiled sheep intestine to protect the king from syphilis. Previously penile sheaths were used, such as the linen one made by Italian anatomist Gabriel Fio Pius. 1523 to 1562, but they were too heavy to be successful.
Who developed psychodrama?
Psychodrama was developed by Jacob L. Moreno, 1892 to 1974, a psychiatrist born in Romania, who lived and practiced in Vienna until he came to the United States in 1927. He soon began to conduct psychodrama sessions and founded a psychodrama institute in Beacon, New York, in 1934. Largely because of Moreno's efforts, it is practiced worldwide. Psychodrama is defined as a method of group psychotherapy in which personality makeup, interpersonal relationships, conflicts, and emotional problems are explored by means of special dramatic methods.
What is synthetic skin?
The material consists of a very porous collagen fiber bonded to a sugar polymer. Glycominoglycan, obtained from shark cartilage. It is covered by a sheet of silicon rubber. It was developed by Yanis V. Yanis, 1935, and his colleagues at Massachusetts Institute of Technology around 1985. Soon after its introduction, synthetic skin was used to successfully treat more than 100 severely burned victims.
How long is a lightning stroke?
The visible length of the streak of lightning depends on the terrain and can vary greatly. In mountainous areas where clouds are low, the flash can be as short as 300 yards, 273 meters. Whereas in flat terrain, where clouds are high, the bolt can measure as long as 4 miles, 6.5 kilometers. The usual length is about 1 mile, 1.6 kilometers. But streaks of lightning up to 20 miles, 32 kilometers, have been recorded. The stroke channel is very narrow, perhaps as little as half an inch, 1.27 centimeters. It is surrounded by a corona envelope or a glowing discharge that can be as wide as 10 to 20 feet, 3 to 6 meters, in diameter. The speed of lightning can vary from 100 to 1000 miles, 161 to 1610 kilometers per second for the downward leader track. The return stroke is 87,000 miles 140,070 kilometers per second, almost half the speed of light.
What is the origin of land plants?
Many scientists believe land plants evolved from green algae. Green algae, especially the carpites, share a number of biochemical and metabolic traits with plants. Both contain the same photosynthetic pigments scaritines, xanthophylls, as well as chlorophylls A and B. Cellulose is a major component of the cell walls of plants and algae, and both store their excess carbohydrates as starch. In addition, some aspects of cell division, particularly the formation of new cross walls, only occurs in plants and certain carpites, such as species of the genera Cerera and Colechid.
What is antimatter?
Antimatter is the exact opposite of normal matter. Antimatter was predicted in a series of equations derived by Paul Dirac, 1902 to 1984. He was attempting to combine the theory of relativity with equations governing the behavior of electrons. In order to make his equations work, he had to predict the existence of a particle that would be similar to the electron, but opposite in charge. This particle, discovered in 1932, was the antimatter equivalent of the electron and called the positron, electrons with a positive charge. Other antimatter particles would not be discovered until 1955, when particle accelerators were finally able to confirm the existence of the antineutron and antiproton, protons with a negative charge. Antiatoms, pairings of positrons and antiprotons, are other examples of antimatter.
What is the economic importance of roots?
Carrots, beets, turnips, radishes, horseradish, sugar beets, and sweet potatoes are all taproots that have been used as food for human consumption for centuries. The spices licorice, sassafras, and sarsaparilla, the flavoring used to make root beer, are derived from roots. The drugs aconite, gentian, ipecac, ginseng, reserpine, a tranquilizer, and protoveratrine, a heart relaxant, are all extracted from the roots of plants.
How large is the uterus?
The uterus, from the Latin, meaning womb, is an inverted, pear-shaped structure located between the urinary bladder and the rectum. The uterus is normally 3 inches, 7.5 centimeters, long and 2 inches, 5 centimeters, wide. It weighs 1 to 1.4 ounces, 30 to 40 grams. During pregnancy, implantation of a fertilized ovum occurs in the uterus. The uterus then houses, nourishes, and protects the developing fetus. It can increase 3 to 6 times in size during the course of pregnancy. At the end of gestation, the uterus is usually 12 inches, 30 centimeters, long and weighs 2.4 pounds, 1,100 grams. The total weight of the uterus and its contents, fetus and fluid, at the end of pregnancy is approximately 22 pounds, 10 kilograms.
How much do plants contribute to the human diet?
In the United States and Western Europe, approximately 65% of a human being's total caloric intake and 35% of consumed protein are obtained from plants or plant products. Soybeans are an example of a plant with high protein content. In developing nations, almost 90% of calories and more than 80% of protein in a person's diet are from plants.
What health risks are associated with obesity?
People who are obese are more likely to develop a variety of health problems, including hypertension, dyslipidemia, for example, high total cholesterol or high levels of triglycerides, type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, stroke, gallbladder disease, osteoarthritis, sleep apnea and respiratory problems, some cancers, endometrial, breast, and colon.
What is the most successful and diverse group of terrestrial vertebrates?
Birds, members of the class Aves, are the most successful of all terrestrial vertebrates. There are 28 orders of living birds with almost 10,000 species distributed over almost the entire Earth. The success of birds is basically due to the development of the feather.
Are spiders really dangerous?
Most spiders are harmless organisms that, rather than being dangerous to humans, are actually allies in the continuing battle to control insects. Most venom produced by spiders to kill prey is usually harmless to humans. However, there are 2 spiders in the United States that can produce severe or even fatal bites. They are the black widow spider, Latrodectus mactans, and the brown recluse spider, Loxocels reclusa. Black widows are shiny black, with a bright red hourglass on the underside of the abdomen. The venom of the black widow is neurotoxic and affects the nervous system. About 4 out of 1,000 black widow bites have been reported as fatal. Brown recluse spiders have a violin-shaped strip on their back.
What seedless, vascular plant played a role in early photography?
Prior to the invention of flashbulbs, photographers used flash powder that consisted almost entirely of dried spores from club mosses of the genus Lycopodium. Layers of sediment formed over the plant material during each flood cycle. Heat and pressure built up in these accumulated layers and converted the plant material to coal. The various types of coal, lignite, bituminous, and anthracite, were formed as a result of the different temperatures and pressures to which the layers were exposed.
Whose work during the Roman era became the authority on anatomy?
Galen, 130 to 200, a Greek physician, anatomist, and physiologist living during the time of the Roman Empire, was one of the most influential and authoritative authors on medical subjects. His writings include on anatomical procedures, on the usefulness of the parts of the body, on the natural faculties, and hundreds of other treatises. Since human dissection was forbidden, Galen made most of his observations on different animals. He correctly described bones and muscles and observed muscles working in contracting pairs. He was also able to describe heart valves and structural differences between arteries and veins. While his work contained many errors, he provided many accurate anatomical details that are still regarded as classics. Galen's writings were the accepted standard text for anatomical studies for 1,400 years.
Who is considered the founder of systematic astronomy?
The Greek scientist Hipparchus, c. 190 to 120 BCE, is considered to be the father of systematic astronomy. He measured as accurately as possible the directions of objects in the sky. He compiled the first catalogue of stars, containing about 850 entries, and designated each star's celestial coordinates, indicating its position in the sky. Hipparchus also divided the stars according to their apparent brightness or magnitudes.
What is the world's highest waterfall?
Angel Falls, named after the explorer and bush pilot Jimmy Angel. On the Carao tributary in Venezuela is the highest waterfall in the world. It has a total height of 3,212 feet, 979 meters. With its longest unbroken drop being 2,648 feet, 807 meters. It is difficult to determine the height of a waterfall because many are composed of several sections rather than one straight drop. The highest waterfall in the United States is Yosemite Falls on a tributary of the Merced River in Yosemite National Park. California, with a total drop of 2,425 feet, 739 meters. There are 3 sections to the Yosemite Falls. Upper Yosemite is 1,430 feet, 435 meters. Cascades, middle portion, is 675 feet, 205 meters, and Lower Yosemite is 320 feet, 97 meters.
What is the instrument a doctor uses to check reflexes?
A plesser or percussor is a small hammer, usually with a soft rubber head, used to tap the part directly. Also called a reflex hammer or a percussion hammer. It is used by a doctor to elicit reflexes by tapping on tendons. In the most common test, the patient sits on a surface high enough to allow his legs to dangle freely, and the physician lightly taps the patellar tendon, just below the kneecap. This stimulus briefly stretches the quadriceps muscle on top of the thigh. The stretch causes the muscle to contract, which makes the leg kick forward. The time interval between the tendon tap and the start of the leg extension is about 50 microseconds. That interval is too short for the involvement of the brain and is totally reflexive. This test indicates the status of an individual's reflex control of movement.
What is inertia?
Inertia is the tendency of all objects and matter in the universe to stay still, or, if moving, to continue moving in the same direction unless acted on by some outside force. This forms the first law of motion formulated by Isaac Newton, 1642 to 1727. To move a body at rest, enough external force must be used to overcome the object's inertia. The larger the object is, the more force is required to move it. In his Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, published in 1687, Newton sets forth all 3 laws of motion. Newton's second law is that the force to move a body is equal to its mass times its acceleration. F equals ma, and the third law states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction.
What are endorphins?
Endorphins and closely related chemicals called enkephalins are part of a larger group called opioids, which have properties similar to drugs such as heroin or morphine. They can act not only as painkillers but also can induce a sense of well-being or euphoria. Clinical applications of endorphin research include possible treatments for some forms of mental illness, treatment or control of pain for chronic pain sufferers, development of new anesthetics, and the development of non-addictive, safe, and effective pain relievers.
What are imaginary numbers?
Imaginary numbers are the square roots of negative numbers. Since the square is the product of two equal numbers with like signs, it is always positive. Therefore, no number multiplied by itself can give a negative real number. The symbol I is used to indicate an imaginary number.
What is the difference between an ophthalmologist, optometrist, and optician?
An ophthalmologist is a physician who specializes in care of the eyes. Ophthalmologists conduct examinations to determine the quality of vision and the need for corrective glasses or contact lenses. They also check for the presence of any disorders, such as glaucoma or cataracts. Ophthalmologists may perform surgery or prescribe glasses, contact lenses, or medication, as necessary. An optometrist is a specialist trained to examine the eyes and to prescribe, supply, and adjust glasses or contact lenses. Because they are not physicians, optometrists may not prescribe drugs or perform surgery. An optometrist refers patients requiring these types of treatment to an ophthalmologist. An optician is a person who fits, supplies, and adjusts glasses or contact lenses. Because their training is limited, opticians may not examine or test eyes or prescribe glasses or drugs.
What are the major distinguishing characteristics of ceramics?
Ceramics are crystalline compounds of metallic and nonmetallic elements. Ceramics are the most rigid of all materials with an almost total absence of ductility. They have the highest known melting points of materials, with some being as high as 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. 3,870 degrees Celsius, and many that melt at temperatures of 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit 1,927 degrees Celsius. Glass, brick, cement, and plaster, dinnerware, artware, and porcelain enamel are all examples of ceramics.
Is there a name for the heart monitoring machine that people sometimes wear for a day or two while carrying on their normal activities?
A portable version of the electrocardiograph, ECG, designed by J. Holter, is called a Holter monitor. Electrodes attached to the chest are linked to a small box containing a recording device. The device records the activity of the heart.
What were the two main aims of alchemy?
The main aim of alchemy, the early study of chemical reactions, was the transmutation, or transformation, of common elements into gold. Needless to say, all attempts to change a substance into gold were unsuccessful. A second aim of alchemy was to discover an elixir or universal remedy that would promote everlasting life. Again, this pursuit was unsuccessful.
What is the Heimlich maneuver?
This effective first aid technique to resuscitate choking and drowning victims was introduced by Dr. Henry J. Heimlich, 1920, of Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio. It is a technique for removing a foreign body from the trachea or pharynx where it is preventing flow of air to the lungs. When the victim is in the vertical position, the maneuver consists of applying subdiaphragmatic pressure by wrapping one's arms around the victim's waist from behind, making a fist with one hand and placing it against the victim's abdomen between the navel and the rib cage, clasping one's fist with the other hand, and pressing in with a quick, forceful thrust. Repeat several times if necessary. When the victim is in the horizontal position, which some experts recommend, the rescuer straddles the victim's thighs.
What is a reflex?
A reflex is a predictable, involuntary response to a stimulus. It was given this name in the 18th century because it appeared that the stimulus was reflected off of the spinal cord to generate the response, just as light is reflected by a mirror. Reflexes allow the body to respond quickly to internal and external changes in the environment in order to maintain homeostasis. Reflexes that involve the skeletal muscles are called somatic reflexes. Reflexes that involve responses of smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or a gland are called visceral or autonomic reflexes.
What is the toxic release inventory, TRI?
TRI is a government-mandated, publicly available compilation of information on the release of nearly 650 individual toxic chemicals and toxic chemical categories by manufacturing facilities in the United States. The law requires manufacturers to state the amounts of chemicals they release directly to air, land, or water, or that they transfer to off-site facilities that treat or dispose of wastes. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency compiles these reports into an annual inventory and makes the information available in a computerized database. In 2008, 21,695 facilities released 3.9 billion pounds, 1.8 billion kilograms, of toxic chemicals into the environment. The total surface water discharges amounted to 246,321,372 pounds, 111,729,495 kilograms. While 1,144,615,081 pounds, 519,188,667 kilograms, were emitted into the air. 1,786,070,607 pounds, 810,148,000 kilograms, were released on site to land. And 196,339,106 pounds, 89,057,920 kilograms, were injected into underground wells. The total amount of toxic chemicals released in 2008 was 6%. 257 million pounds, 116.5 million kilograms, lower than the amount released in 2007.
What breeds of dogs do not shed?
Poodles, Kerry Blue Terriers, and Schnauzers do not shed.
Why are the hot, humid days of summer called dog days?
This period of extremely hot, humid, sultry weather that traditionally occurs in the Northern Hemisphere. In July and August received its name from the dog star Sirius of the constellation Canis Major. At this time of year, Sirius, the brightest visible star, rises in the east at the same time as the sun. Ancient Egyptians believed that the heat of this brilliant star added to the sun's heat to create this hot weather. Sirius was blamed for the withering droughts, sickness, and discomfort that occurred during this time. Traditional dog days start on July 3rd and end on August 11th.
What is the hydrologic cycle?
The hydrologic cycle takes place in the hydrosphere, which is the region containing all the water in the atmosphere and Earth's surface. It involves 5 phases: condensation, infiltration, runoff, evaporation, and precipitation. Rain, and other precipitation, is part of the hydrologic cycle.
What is Colton?
Coltan is the shortened name for the metallic or columbide tantalite. When refined it becomes a heat-resistant powder, tantalum, which can hold a high electrical charge. These properties make it a vital element in creating capacitors, the electronic elements that control current flow inside miniature circuit boards. Tantalum capacitors are used in almost all cell phones, laptop computers, pagers, and other electrical devices.
Why do dogs howl at sirens?
The high pitch of a siren is very similar to the pitch of a dog's howl. A dog's howl is a way of communicating with other dogs, either to indicate location or to define territory. When a dog responds to an ambulance or fire engine siren, he is returning the call of the wild.
Why does excessive exercise cause muscles to become stiff and sore?
During vigorous exercise, the circulatory system cannot supply oxygen to muscle fibers quickly enough. In the absence of oxygen, the muscle cells begin to produce lactic acid, which accumulates in the muscle. It is this buildup of lactic acid that causes soreness and stiffness.
What are some interesting features of jellyfishes?
Jellyfishes live close to the shores of most oceans and spend most of their time floating near the surface. Jellyfishes have bell-shaped bodies that are between 95% and 96% water. They have a muscular ring around the margin of the bell that contracts rhythmically to propel them through the water. Jellyfishes are carnivores, subduing their prey with stinging tentacles and drawing the paralyzed animal into the digestive cavity. Jellyfishes are gelatinous. You can see through their bodies.
What are the largest and smallest organelles in a cell?
The largest organelle in a cell is the nucleus. The next largest organelle would be the chloroplast, which is substantially bigger than a mitochondrion. The smallest organelle in a cell is the ribosome.
What is a bishop's ring?
It is a ring around the sun, usually with a reddish outer edge. It is probably due to dust particles in the air, since it is observed after all great volcanic eruptions.
What are some examples of biofield therapies?
Qigong, Reiki, and therapeutic touch are examples of biofield therapies. Qigong, a part of traditional Chinese medicine, combines movement, meditation, and controlled breathing. The goal is to improve blood flow and the flow of qi. Reiki, based on the spiritual teachings of Mikao Yuzui, 1865–1926, of Japan, is used to promote overall health and well-being. Practitioners of Reiki seek to transmit a universal energy to a person, either from a distance or by placing their hands on or near the person. The goal is to heal the spirit and thus the body. Therapeutic touch is a therapy in which practitioners pass their hands over another person's body with the intent to use their own perceived healing energy to identify energy imbalances and promote health.
How are caves formed?
Water erosion creates most caves found along coastal areas. Waves crashing against the rock over many years wear away part of the rock, forming a cave. Inland caves are also formed by water erosion, in particular, groundwater eroding limestone. As the limestone dissolves, underground passageways and caverns are formed.
What is the importance of the rainforest?
Half of all medicines prescribed worldwide are originally derived from wild products, and the U.S. National Cancer Institute has identified more than 2,000 tropical rainforest plants with the potential to fight cancer. Rubber, timber, gums, resins and waxes, pesticides, lubricants, nuts and fruits, flavorings and dyes, tufts, steroids, latexes, essential and edible oils, and bamboo are among the products that would be drastically affected by the depletion of the tropical forests. In addition, rainforests greatly influence patterns of rain deposition in tropical areas. Smaller rainforests mean less rain. Large groups of plants, like those found in rainforests, also help control levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Do any mammals fly?
Bats, order Chiroptera with 986 species, are the only truly flying mammals. Although several gliding mammals are referred to as flying, such as the flying squirrel and flying lemur. The wings of bats are double membranes of skin stretching from the sides of the body to the hind legs and tail, and are actually skin extensions of the back and belly. The wing membranes are supported by the elongated fingers of the forelimbs, or arms. Nocturnal, active at night, ranging in length from 1.5 inches, 25 millimeters, to 1.3 feet, 40.6 centimeters, and living in caves or crevices. Bats inhabit most of the temperate and tropical regions of both hemispheres. The majority of species feed on insects and fruit, while some tropical species eat pollen and nectar of flowers, and insects found inside them. Moderate-sized species usually prey on small mammals, birds, lizards, and frogs, and some eat fish. But true vampire bats, 3 species, eat the blood of animals by making an incision in the animal's skin. From these bats, animals can contract rabies. Most bats do not find their way around by sight but have evolved a sonar system called echolocation, for locating solid objects. Bats emit vocal sounds through the nose or mouth while flying. These sounds, usually above the human hearing range, are reflected back as echoes. This method enables bats, when flying in darkness, to avoid solid objects and to locate the position of flying insects. Bats have the most acute sense of hearing of any land animal. Hearing frequencies as high as 120 to 210 kHz. The highest frequency humans can hear is 20 kHz.
What plants produce essential oils that are commonly used in aromatherapy?
Aromatherapy is a holistic approach to healing using essential oils extracted from plants. Holistic medicine looks at the health of the whole individual, and treatments emphasize the connection of mind, body, and spirit. The term aromatherapy was first used by René Gattefossé, 1881 to 1950. A French perfume chemist. He discovered the healing powers of lavender oil following a laboratory accident during which he burned his hand. Gattefossé began to investigate the properties of lavender oil and other essential oils and published a book on plant extracts. During aromatherapy treatments, essential oils are absorbed through breath or the pores of the skin. This process triggers certain physiological responses.
Did Charles Darwin have any nicknames?
Darwin had several nicknames. As a young naturalist on board the HMS Beagle, he was called Philos because of his intellectual pursuits and flycatcher when his shipmates tired of him filling the ship with his collections. Later in his life, when he became a leader in the scientific community, journalists referred to him as the Sage of Down or the Saint of Science. But his friend Thomas Henry Huxley privately called him the Tsar of Down and the Pope of Science. His own favorite nickname was Stultus the Fool, and he often signed letters to scientific friends with Stultus. This name referred to his habit of trying experiments most people would prejudge to be fruitless or fool's experiments.
What is the origin of the expression "do not fold, spindle, or mutilate"?
This is the inscription on an IBM punched card. Frequently, office workers organize papers and forms by stapling or folding them together, or by impaling them on a spindle. Because Hall Erith, punched, card readers scan uniform rectangular holes in a precise arrangement. Any damage to the physical card makes it unusable. In the 1950s and 1960s, when punched cards became widespread, manufacturers printed a warning on each card. IBM's "do not fold, spindle, or mutilate" was the best known. In 1964, the student revolution at the University of California, Berkeley, used the phrase as a symbol of authority and regimentation.
How did a total solar eclipse confirm Einstein's theory of general relativity?
When formulating his theory of general relativity, Albert Einstein proposed that the curvature of space near a massive object like the Sun would bend light that passed close by. For example, a star seen near the edge of the sun during an eclipse would appear to have shifted by 1.75 arcseconds from its usual place. The British astronomer Arthur Eddington, 1882–1944, confirmed Einstein's hypothesis during an eclipse on May 29. 1919. The subsequent attention given to Eddington's findings helped establish Einstein's reputation as one of science's greatest figures.
What group of animals was the first to make a partial transition from water to land?
Amphibians have made a partial transition to terrestrial life. The living amphibians include newts, salamanders, frogs, and toads. Although lungfish made a partial transition to living out of the water, amphibians were the first to struggle onto land and become adapted to a life of breathing air while not constantly surrounded by water.
Which gland is the largest?
The liver is the largest gland and the second largest organ after the skin. At 2.5 to 3.3 pounds, 1.1 to 1.5 kilograms. The liver is 7 times larger than it needs to be to perform its estimated 500 functions. It is the main chemical factory of the body. A duct gland that produces bile to break down fats and reduce acidity in the digestive process. The liver is also a part of the circulatory system. It cleans poisons from the blood and regulates blood composition.
What is Excelsior?
Excelsior is a trade name dating from the mid-19th century for the curly, fine wood shavings used as packing material when shipping breakable items. It is also used as a cushioning and stuffing material. Poplar, aspen, basswood or cottonwood are woods that are often made into Excelsior.
What is the difference between a median and a mean?
If a string of numbers is arranged in numerical order, the median is the middle value of the string. If there is an even number of values in the string, the median is found by adding the two middle values and dividing by 2. The arithmetic mean, also known as the simple average, is found by taking the sum of the numbers in the string and dividing by the number of items in the string. While easy to calculate for relatively short strings, the arithmetic mean can be misleading, as very large or very small values in the string can distort it. For example, the mean of the salaries of a professional football team would be skewed if one of the players was a high-earning superstar. It could be well above the salaries of any of the other players, thus making the mean higher. The mode is the number in a string that appears most often. For the string 111222234455667, for example, the median is the middle number of the series. 3. The arithmetic mean is the sum of numbers divided by the number of numbers in the series. 51/15 equals 3.4. The mode is the number that occurs most often, 2.
What is the name of the seal-like animal in Florida?
The West Indian manatee, Trichus manatus, in the winter moves to more temperate parts of Florida, such as the warm headwaters of the Crystal and Homosassa rivers in central Florida or the tropical waters of southern Florida. When the air temperature rises to 50 degrees Fahrenheit 10 degrees Celsius, it will wander back along the Gulf Coast and up the Atlantic coast as far as Virginia. Long-range offshore migrations to the coast of Guyana and South America have been documented. In 1893, when the population of manatees in Florida was reduced to several thousand, the state gave it legal protection from being hunted or commercially exploited. However, many animals continue to be killed or injured by the encroachment of humans. Entrapment in locks and dams, collisions with barges and power boat propellers, and other man-made objects, cause at least 30% of the manatee deaths, which total 125 to 130 annually.
What are designer drugs, such as China White?
Designer drugs are synthesized chemicals that resemble such available narcotics as fentanyl and meperidine. China White, 3-methylfentanyl, is one of these drugs and is an analog of fentanyl. It is 3,000 times more potent than morphine. Even small amounts can be fatal. And it has been responsible for more than 100 overdose deaths in California.
What is progeria?
Progeria is premature old age. There are two distinct forms of the condition, both of which are extremely rare. In Hutchinson-Gilford syndrome, aging starts around the age 4, and by 10 or 12, the affected child has all the external features of old age, including gray hair, baldness, and loss of fat, resulting in thin limbs and sagging skin on the trunk and face. There are also internal degenerative changes, such as atherosclerosis, fatty deposits lining the artery walls. Death usually occurs at puberty. Werner's syndrome, or adult progeria, starts in early adult life and follows the same rapid progression as the juvenile form with individuals developing disorders usually associated with aging as early as in their 20s and 30s. Most individuals with Werner's syndrome live until their late 40s or early 50s. The cause of progeria is unknown.
What is the largest constellation?
Hydra is the largest constellation, extending from Gemini to the south of Virgo. It has a recognizable long line of stars. The name Hydra is derived from the water snake monster killed by Hercules in ancient mythology.
What is the difference between porpoises and dolphins?
Marine dolphins, family Delphinidae, and porpoises, family Phocinidae, together comprise about 40 species. The chief differences between dolphins and porpoises occur in the snout and teeth. True dolphins have a beak-like snout and cone-shaped teeth. True porpoises have a rounded snout and flat or spade-shaped teeth.
What was Richard Feynman's contribution to physics?
Richard Feynman, 1918 to 1988, developed a theory of quantum electrodynamics that described the interaction of electrons, positrons, and photons, providing physicists a new way to work with electrons. He reconstructed quantum mechanics and electrodynamics in his own terms, formulating a matrix of measurable quantities visually represented by a series of graphs, known as the Feynman diagrams. Feynman was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1965.
What is punctuated equilibrium?
Punctuated equilibrium is a model of macroevolution first detailed in 1972 by Niles Eldredge, 1943, and Stephen J. Gould, 1941 to 2002. It can be considered either a rival or supplementary model to the more gradual moving model of evolution posited by neo-Darwinism. The punctuated equilibrium model essentially asserts that most of geological history shows periods of little evolutionary change, followed by short, geologically speaking, a few million years, periods of time of rapid evolutionary change. Gould and Eldredge's work has been buttressed by the discovery of the Hox genes that control embryonic development. Hox genes are found in all vertebrates and many other species as well. They control the placement of body parts in the developing embryo. Relatively minor mutations in these gene sequences could result in major body changes for species in a short period of time, thereby giving rise to new forms of organisms and therefore new species.
When did the first nuclear power plant generate electricity for residential use?
The first nuclear power plant to generate electricity for residential use was a small facility in Obninsk, in the former Soviet Union, on June 27, 1954. The capacity of the power plant was only 5 megawatts. Due to the status of international relations during the Cold War, this accomplishment was not reported widely in the West. 2 years later, in August 1956, the Calder Hall Unit 1 power plant became operational in Great Britain. Its initial capacity was 50 megawatts of electricity. Other units were added and it continued to operate for nearly 50 years. Until March 2003, Calder Hall was the longest operating reactor in history.
Who is considered the founder of physiology?
As an experimenter, Claude Bernard, 1813 to 1878. Enriched physiology by his introduction of numerous new concepts into the field. The most famous of these concepts is that of the milieu intérieur or internal environment. The complex functions of the various organs are closely interrelated and are all directed to maintaining the constancy of internal conditions despite external changes. All cells exist in this aqueous, blood and lymph, internal environment, which bathes the cells and provides a medium for the elementary exchange of nutrients and waste material.
Do viruses contain both DNA and RNA?
Viruses have either DNA or RNA as their genomic material, whereas cells including bacteria have both.
Why do ecosystems need decomposers?
While energy flows through ecosystems in only one direction, entering at the producer level and exiting as heat and the transfer of energy as biomass, to consumers, chemical compounds can be reused over and over again. In a well-functioning ecosystem, some organisms make their living by breaking down structures and recycling the compounds. These organisms are known as decomposers.
What are the precious metals?
This is a general term for expensive metals that are used for making coins, jewelry, and ornaments. The name is limited to gold, silver, and platinum. Expense or rarity does not make a metal precious, but rather it is a value set by law that states that the object made of these metals has a certain intrinsic value. The term is not synonymous with noble metals, although a metal such as platinum may be both noble and precious.